1983 and Somalia. And you know, Somalia is sort of important. Hopefully all of you are sort of now familiar with what Somalia is, because it is becoming a battleground in this war of radical Islam. And hopefully some of you know that we have a pretty heavy military investment in the country now. Not through the government, because there really isn't a government. It hasn't been since the regime of Siad Barre, who was another unlikely prospect for support by a Christian organization. He described himself as a Quranic Marxist. Put pictures of himself with Mohammedan marks around the country. He's just smiling in the middle, the happy synthesis. But the Soviets have been his patron. The geopolitics of the Cold War, they dumped him. He needed a new patron. He reached out to the family through Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, still in power today. Chuck Grassley, a couple of defense contractors, began praying with Siad Barre. And Barre was interesting in all the documents. He was the most candid about what he wanted. He says, yeah, sure, I'll pray to Jesus. And in return, here's what I want. And he sent a list. I want my defense budget doubled. I want meetings with the White House. I want a hands-off policy while I crack down on a little rebel group I've got to take care of in the north. The family answered, done, done, and done. When we look at the history books, it was done. And he cracked down on the rebel group in the north, and then he found one in the south, the west, the east, and the middle. He reduced his country to rubble, from which it has not yet arisen. So when I published this book over here, I think, when I published The Family, I tried to lead with that story. And that was my mistake. You know, the book came out in 2008. I can't complain too much. It got, you know, made the bestseller list very briefly, got the media and so on. But I would talk to producers, other media producers, say, let's talk about what happened in Somalia. And they would say, I remember one producer put it really succinctly, said, what's a Somalia? No one was too interested. So, you know, the book kind of came and went. And then something like a miracle happened. I told you at the beginning, I described praying with these guys. I should say they have a kind of dumbed-down Calvinist idea that once you are a member of the elect, you are permanently a member of the elect. So I am a brother of the family, a bad brother. Still a brother, you can't resign. So I like to think that brothers are loyal to one another. Coburn was to Ensign. I like to think Ensign and Brother Sanford were sitting around saying, well, that's a shame what happened to Jeff's book. What could we do to help him? And they came up with this brilliant strategy. And they came out and confessed their affairs. And now, suddenly, the very same producer, by the way, said, what's a Somali, was now on the phone. This is a story. Country that nobody knows where it is, reduced to rubble, subversion of democracy, boring. But Congressman sleeping with someone he's not supposed to. This is news. And it became big news. Magazine, when Ensign confessed, the magazine editor came to me and said, do you want to write about this? And I said, no, I've written a long book about this group. I don't want to return to the subject. Governor Sanford confessed in an amazing press conference. If you didn't see it, go on YouTube and watch it. It's fantastic, the best political theater I've ever seen. And I don't mean to say it's not sincere, the tears, the stories about hiking the Appalachian Trail, it's all sincere, and it's just a rare moment in American life. And I enjoyed watching it, but I didn't want to write about it at the time. I said, again, this man's sins are his own. I'm not interested in pointing a finger and saying, oh, you failed. And my problem with these guys is that they do this. But then, a few days later, Governor Sanford, explaining why he was not going to give up his office, as he had called on President Clinton to do in similar circumstances, invoked sort of an unusual story. He said, you know, Clinton is just the president. Mark Sanford's more like a king. King David, to be exact. He says he's like King David. He's speaking to his staff, and this was a public meeting. And of course, he's referring to the story of King David. Some of the, not David with his slingshot, but David with Bathsheba. David up on the roof and looking down and sees a beautiful woman and desires her, and sends his guards to bring her to him and seduces her, and arranges, of course, to have her husband killed and moved out, removed from the scene. And yet, David stays in power. And he says that's kind of how he's going to do things. Let me read you a passage from the book about why that brought me back to the story. Yes, says Sanford, David fell in very, very significant ways, but then picked up the pieces and built from there. The key, Sanford declared, is humility. And he could do humility. He did some right there, apologizing to his cabinet, making clear he was not going to resign. Like David, he had a calling. He was chosen. God had put him in office, and God would take him out. Until then, Mark Sanford would remain governor of South Carolina. This logic forms one of the foundations of C Street, the alchemy by which men elected by citizens persuade themselves that they were, in fact, selected by God. That sounds impossibly arrogant, but it is, as Sanford said, a kind of humility. The chosen politician does not take credit for his success. He does not suppose that it was his virtue that led the people to elect him. He is just another sinner. But God wants to use him as he used David. The other side of such humility is the application of responsibility. One chosen for leadership isn't accountable for his own actions. Now, that's not what the rabbis teach when they speak of King David, of course, and nor is it the real meaning of Calvinism's doctrine of God's elect. It's American fundamentalism, response to what one family leader once lamented as the substitution of democracy for religion. The bastardization of the King David story versus the process, replacing democracy with religion. Mark Sanford used that reversal to justify his own power in defiance of the minor sin of adultery. If David got a pass for murder, so too should Sanford be excused the contemplation of a beautiful women's tan lines on which he'd rhapsodized in the love letter soon made public. That calculation seems reasonable enough, if self-serving, until one considers the implications. David Coe, for instance, son of Doug Coe, heir apparent to the leadership of the family, puts the application of the King David story in starker terms. The first time I ever heard King David invoked within the family was when David Coe visited the men with whom I was living at Ivanwald. They were a group of young future leadership prospects, and David Coe had come to do some spiritual training. Like his father, David Coe is tall, dark, lanky, and slow-moving. So calmly charismatic, one forgets he is teaching. Coe lessons seem like gentle musings. That day, David Coe mused on King David, who liked to do really, really, really bad things, he said. Why then should we revere him? The men were stumped. Maybe because I was raised around Judaism, a half-Jew who once celebrated both Passover and Easter, I knew the answer. Because he was chosen, he said. Yes, said Coe. Chosen. Interesting set of rules, isn't it? Then he turned to another man. Bo, let's say I hear you rape 3 little girls. And now here you are at Ivanwald. What would I think of you, Bo, a good-natured jock who loved wrestling, dancing, and long walks in the woods, supposed that Coe would not think well of him at all. But that wasn't so, Coe answered. Bo, he explained, was one of God's tools. That's what it means to be chosen. The normal rules don't apply. Morality, a human construct, does not apply. Moral orders, he said, that's for kids. God's will is beyond morals. It wasn't that Coe thought Bo should rape 3 little girls, or that he would not be horrified if Bo did. But such crimes would be beside the point. We simply obey, Coe said. Genghis Khan, Coe suggested, provided a good example. According to Coe, Genghis Khan had conquered not for greed, but because God told him to. When some monks asked him what justified his bloody conquest, Genghis answered, I don't ask, I submit. Coe applied this logic to contemporary politics. We elect our leaders, he said dismissively. Jesus elects his. So I decided to come back to the story, and whereas the family had been history, to really look at the shape of this fundamentalism in the modern world. I had told the story of Suharto in Indonesia in 1966, and Satbari in Somalia in 1983, but now I wanted to follow the money out of the world. The family did well, spent a long time on the bestseller list, and because of that, people heard about it, people who've been part of the group, and they started coming to me, whistleblowers, sharing documents, sharing accounts that I was able to then track down and report on. And in the book, I talk about some like, for instance, Senator Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma, Coburn's fellow senator there. Inhofe is an interesting guy. He called separation of church and state the phoniest idea there ever was. He opposed to global warming, or rather, he's actually defines global warming. He's opposed to any attempt to address it. He says people who believe in global warming and gays are the great threats to democracy. Took to the floor of the Senate with a picture of his extended family to say, this is the most important document we have in the debate on homosexuality. Look at my family, not a single gay one in the family. So there you go. I don't know about your family, but we're good. This is not a nice man, but he is a brother in Christ, and I have a soft spot in my heart for him because he's so damn candid about it. At the time when the C Street scandals broke, a lot of the politicians involved started saying, oh, I just go there for spiritual counseling. I never heard of this talk. I didn't know the rent was subsidized. It's just a personal thing. Inhofe pipes up, I don't know what they're talking about. I have political meetings there. And then over the summer of 2009, working with other reporters, we started uncovering what I call junkets for Jesus. These congressmen were traveling the world representing the interests of the family at the expense of American interests on the family's dime. Once again, Inhofe to the rescue. All these guys are saying, oh, we're just going to have friendship meetings with these leaders of these foreign heads of state. Not Inhofe. He said, I go to promote the political philosophy of Jesus as taught to me by Doug Coe. I use my status as a senator to open the doors to the halls of power. And he says, and the best part is, you pay for it. Inhofe goes on the taxpayer's dime. Terrific investigation by the Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the newspaper discovered he spent $187,000, and that's just a piece of the pie. That's what they could uncover on 20 missionary trips. He called his Jesus thing, but he used government money, flew on military planes, military escort, to promote the political philosophy of Jesus as he understands it, as taught to him by Doug Coe. Who is he sharing these great insights with? Well, one man for whom he became a great champion, who he brought into the American fold, the love of the American Christ, was a guy named Sani Abacha. Sani Abacha was the dictator of Nigeria, another very oil-rich country. Inhofe tries to keep his life unified. He's a winner of Lifetime Achievement Award from the petroleum industry. Most of his money comes from oil. So when he's sharing the love of Christ, naturally he goes to oil-rich nations. Sani Abacha, dictator, the United States wanted to put sanctions on him because he was robbing Nigeria, which should be a wealthy country actually, robbing of its oil wealth. He's a Muslim, but he sat down and, according to Inhofe, he just cried when he heard about Jesus, whom apparently he hadn't heard of before Inhofe got there. Well, when this came out a little while ago, one of the leaders of the family was defending us, saying, geez, can't Abacha have a friend? Because, you know, it's lonely at the top. That's why we minister to the top men. Abacha did have a friend. Abacha died, actually, not long after his visit with Inhofe, died in bed with 3 prostitutes. He had other friends. Abacha had a friend in Inhofe who fought these sanctions successfully. Never any sanctions